The Catholic Church has long been connected with art and beauty, right? We've been talking a lot about that in our church that we restored over a year ago now. And again, no, it's not a mystery, again, that, whether it's sacred music, sacred art, architecture, all those kinds of things have really been tied very closely to the church over its 2,000-year history. And I think we see art and beauty as a way to kind of point to higher things, higher realities, transcendental realities. And it helps us as we're surrounded by these things, whether it's beautiful paintings, beautiful art, beautiful music. Again, it helps point us to higher truths. I was moved, as a teacher, I would give a couple of lessons on art and Catholicism to my students. And one of the things that we always start with is a letter that St. John Paul II, as Pope, wrote to artists, titled, not beautifully, A Letter to Artists. And so anyways, wanted to just read a little excerpt from that. None can sense more deeply than you who are artists, ingenious creators of beauty that you are, something of what God at the dawn of creation looked upon the work of his hands. A glimmer of that feeling has shone so often in your eyes, like the artists of every age, captivated by the hidden power of sounds and words, colors and shapes. You have admired the work of your inspiration, sensing in it some echo of the mystery of creation with which God, the sole creator of all things, has wished to associate you. There has always been a fruitful dialogue between the church and artists, which has gone on unbroken through 2,000 years. In fact, this dialogue is not dictated merely by historical accident or practical need, but is rooted in the very essence of both religious experience and artistic creativity. The human craftsman mirrors the image of God as creator. I love how he says that at the end of this particular quote. He says, we don't just foster art because we need beautiful churches and we need nice stations of the cross and nice paintings and nice music for Mass, so we're going to act like we care about artists. He's saying it's rooted in the very essence of religious experience to overflow into the desire to create things as God does, to in some way fashion something, to in some way bring to life something beautiful in the image, in the same way that God fashions the world and you and I. And in fact, God desires us to do that. J.R.R. Tolkien called that fulfilling the role of being a sub-creator, creating things within the larger picture of creation that God has made. And so we've promoted beauty in the church for 2,000 years, and art and artists. And I say all this to say that as Catholics, as important as the vocation of an artist is, to mirror the creation that God has made, the people who have the greatest ability to mold, shape, craft, and create something of infinite worth are families. And primarily, parents. There are two sentences at the beginning of the book of Genesis. God sets his plan in place, his creation. As his creation is being formed, God starts to talk about it, right? And God lays out the most fundamental things of God's creation. We hear in the first two chapters, God created mankind in his image. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fertile and multiply. And in case it isn't clear, God reiterates in the next chapter, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, and the two of them become one. That is the plan that the devil seeks to unravel and is at the core of his destruction, right? This belief of those things. And the greatest work, infinitely more than the Mona Lisa or Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, is a human person. And parents, and thus all of us as well in a participatory way who are grandparents, uncles, nieces, and nephews, the larger family as well, is offered the role, the grace of helping shape and form a human child into a saint. to teach, to nurture, to train. God hands that over to us. It might be a good question to ask, why? But we have that question a lot of times. Why did you do that, Lord? And it will be an answer that we won't know until the end of time, but we do believe that it will be a good answer. But all that we know right now is that God has handed that over to us, and primarily and first and foremost to parents. The dignity of being able to shape, to create, and to form a saint. Artists, when they are inspired and motivated to create something, they will forego sleep, money, food even, in order to help create this thing that they have this desire and this idea and this concept of in their mind. We see that in lots of movies about artists, right? The painters and the musicians that we most think of as in art. They give up all those things. What they're motivated by is their desire to create this thing that they have in their mind. Parents are called to operate under the same inspiration, and families are too, to see their vocation to be artists, to be co-creators with God, given a role to play in the shaping and formation, not of a painting, not of a symphony, but of a human person. And God doesn't just dictate this from on high. He doesn't yell this from the clouds and say, this is what I desire, parents to participate in this role and families to help them in that role. It is through a family that Jesus Christ himself submits. He is trained and shaped and raised by it and by parents. Most of his life is unknown. Time with his family, time working, time being taught and trained and loved and formed by parents. God models this himself. He doesn't just tell us to do it. He opts for it as well. The world seeks to rip apart, and the devil seeks to rip apart again everything of God, particularly the most important parts of God's plan. The world tells us that people are not made in the image and likeness of God. The world tells us, and the devil tells us, that God did not create human beings male and female. The world tells us, and the devil tells us, that people should not be fruitful and multiply, and that marriage is not a man and a woman leaving their father and mother and becoming one. Parents have a lot to battle. The Catholic Church and this parish are a place that radically is for families and for parents. We stand behind parents who are making the radical and courageous choice to accept God's call to be artists of people, co-creators of that which has infinite beauty, a human person. We thank all families for their yes to cooperate with the plan of God. We pray for the strength to support them and to fulfill those secondary and backup roles that we've been given behind them. We thank them for their yes to cooperate with the plan of God, a plan that he first lived himself in coming into the world through the formation of parents and a family.